From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. The Alabama legislature is at this very moment finalizing the state's two budgets to send them on to Governor Ivey's desk. The House and Senate have been working since early this morning to pass the General Fund and the Education Trust Fund budgets, with votes on the floor, conference committees to work out the differences, and final passage votes that are happening right now. Let's run through what's in the budgets, starting with the General Fund. Total spending in this General Fund totals $3 billion, which amounts to record spending. This funds the range of non-education state agencies. There was also a $180 million supplemental spending plan that saw $50 million go to a General Fund savings account and $40 million to paying off debt. On the Education Trust Fund, which includes the range of school spending from pre-K to higher education, it also is a record at $8.8 billion total. That includes $5.1 billion to local K-12 schools, $1.5 billion to colleges and universities, $551 million to the Alabama Community College System, and $534 million to the Alabama State Department of Education. On to the $2.8 billion supplemental education spending plan, which has been the real source of drama this session. We have yet another change to the one-time tax rebate. Under the plan that will go to the governor, the amount spent on rebates has been again reduced to $393 million. That would mean, if it becomes law, individual taxpayers would get a $150 rebate check, and couples filing jointly would get $300. Remember that as originally proposed by the governor, those rebates were $400 for individuals and $800 for couples. Instead, the legislature has decided to invest those supplemental funds in a special education savings account at the level of $354 million and an account for school construction controlled by the lieutenant governor at $179 million. So, these budgets are on their way to the desk of Governor Kay Ivey, and now begins a 10-day window in which she can either sign them, veto them, send them back with executive amendments, or let them become law without her signature. Most expect at least some changes on the supplemental bill because it was so different than what she originally proposed. Remember that under the Constitution, the legislature can override her veto, including executive amendments, with a simple majority vote. Senator Arthur Orr chairs the education budget in the Senate. Tonight, during the conference committee on the education bills, he walked through the details of some of the final changes.
With the reduction of the rebate amount, there was $157 million new dollars that came from the rebate or as the House passed it. And so that $157 million that's not going to be rebated, what happens to that? So in this substitute to SB 87, the conference committee has the following recommendations. $75 million will go to the fund to be expended by the Lieutenant Governor's office. I do not have a page and line number on this, but that would increase that amount, my recollection, Chairman Garrett, to $179 million, I think. So that new total will be $179 million for K-12 capital expenses to the Office of the Lieutenant Governor to maintain that grant program. The next item that we have was to go to the Educational Opportunities Reserve Fund, aka the savings account. So that was $150 million total between the capital fund and the savings account. The next item that we have is under the Department of Commerce, and it restores the Senate-passed version of $15 million to the Lauderdale Training Center, which I believe is in the front of the bill on line 105, and that just puts that number back at the Senate passed. The next item is under the Department of Public Health, a $2.5 million expenditure to the Parkinson Association located in Birmingham.
House Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter said he supported a greater rebate than what the Senate sent down. He cited inflation's impact on family budgets.
I think my thing was, when I first talked to the body about it, was just the fact that, $100 is not very much, and as we talked to in the grocery tax, inflation has been tough on families this year, and I felt like it being a little bit more substantial, especially in rural areas, was going to make quite a bit of difference. So I hope that the Senate keeps it in there. I don't know. We'll see. But I just felt like, and I think everybody else did, that was a little bit more fair probably.
On the general fund side, State Representative Rex Reynolds said he was pleased with the final result on the supplemental bill, but not everyone felt the same way.
Starting out with the Agricultural Museum, and this probably is not in order, members, with your list. Restored at $250,000, the Northeast Agribusiness Center, restored at $200,000, City of Hoover Park upgrades, restored at $500,000, Huntsville Crime Stoppers, restored at $25,000, Helen Keller Monument, $200,000. The East Alabama Hospital will remain at $4 million. There's an additional $4 million in the ETF, which brings that project back to the original $8 million. The forensic lab equipment for Huntsville, $4 million. That is split, $2 million in the supplemental and $2 million in the general fund. ABC vaping enforcement was reduced to $200,000. The Welcome Center rocket has been converted to a DECA at $2 million, and there's going to be language that you'll see in the bill that once there is a written proposal on that rocket, then that $2 million would only be released at that time. The park improvements was increased to $6 million. We did remove the Rickwood project specifically, but that was a plus up for the parks.
All these are worthwhile projects. They're good things. They're good for our state. That's not the question at all. The question is, should they be in the state general fund? Well, I think the answer over my objections is they are going to be in the state general fund. So then we've got to start talking about equity. North Alabama, North Central Alabama, South Central Alabama, South Alabama. And unless the general fund budget comes in as different, I don't think we're there. If I have my math correctly from my notes, this will be my 23rd governmental budget that I've been involved in, local and then state. If you count education budgets, maybe add 9 more to that, make it 32. But I feel like we're like the Israelites. We can't remember what we kept doing wrong. And now we're headed in the same direction to do it again. A few years from now, when we see the consequences.
Another big development today. The House passed a bill cutting the state sales tax on groceries. House Bill 250 from State Representative Danny Garrett would gradually remove the tax by 1 percentage point each year, provided there is enough growth in the Education Trust Fund to offset the revenue loss. By 2025, the tax would be cut from 4% to 2%. Garrett said he was open to completely eliminating the tax if results show the budgets can handle it.
What this bill does is substituted. We'll continue to do the 2 cent reduction, but the first cent happens September of this year in one increment, 1 cent. The next 1 cent would happen in 2025, September of 2025. So we get the 2 cents in 1 cent increments in a shorter period of time. And rather than looking back to the prior year appropriation, prior year budget, you're looking forward to the following year to see if there's been 2% growth in revenue. So in other words, when you're projecting, when you're implementing the tax, you're implementing it in a year when you know you've got revenue growth, and that helps be a guardrail for sustainability. So it's the same deal, $300 million fiscal note. We have taken, LFO has run some detailed calculations looking at the projected revenue, modeling recession, and looking at our existing reserve balances, and we have the ability to support and sustain this type of a grocery tax relief.
That bill now goes to the Alabama Senate, where all senators have signed on support of similar legislation. And there you have it, late breaking news here from the State House. And let me just say, we were scrambling to put these numbers together as they were just coming off the LSA printer, and much of this is happening in real time. So if we missed anything significant, we will update you tomorrow on our Week in Review program. In fact, there's one update I can add right now. In the general fund supplemental bill we discussed earlier, $18 million has been added back to the Alabama Department of Mental Health to pay for the Tyler Hardin Mental Health Center in Tuscaloosa. That was a question in the budget from yesterday. We'll be right back with State Senator Kirk Hatcher.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Joining me next is State Senator Kirk Hatcher from Montgomery. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's one of these long days in the State House when the budgets are moving. Mm-hmm. Both budgets, both chambers are going to have just a lot of action. But tell me, I mean, is it tough to keep up with all the moving parts? I mean, just as a senator trying to track different line items?
Oh God, yes. Even when you sit on one of the budget committees, and of course I sit on the Education Budget Committee, and and a part of the reason for that is to be sure that we're doing our due diligence when it comes down to marshaling the resources in a responsible way, mm-hmm. that really supports bottom line our taxpayers in the city, in the state.
I want to get to the supplemental bill because that's kind of where some of the drama is. But mm-hmm. generally speaking, on the budget you deal with, the Education Trust Fund, are you pleased with the products that have come out of the House and Senate?
Overall, I am. Speaking specifically to the education piece, because again, we've just passed yet again, a history-making budget in the education budget of $8.8 billion. So for the last, I would believe, 3 years, these budgets have been historic. But I think Chairman Orr and the rest of the members of the committee are doing the best they can, recognizing these resources, these monetary resources won't always be as robust. Mm-hmm. And so I think between Chairman Orr in the Senate and Chairman Garrett in the House, they're doing, I think, a good job of trying their level best to be sure that we're going to be responsible in our spending, so that we won't find ourselves, in the position we were in only a few years ago, where you're in proration and all these types of things. So yep. That's good to know that they're being conscious of that.
Yeah, I think it has definitely been a theme of this mm-hmm. legislature to save, not spend everything. Mm-hmm. And look, I remember those days. I remember those very difficult budget decisions, and it's hard to go walk into that room and say, "Hey, we're cutting you proration."
Yep.
Well, let's get to the supplemental, because this is where a lot of folks have disagreed. This is the $2.8 billion extra money that is being appropriated. The big ask for Montgomery was setting aside funds to help with the Whitewater Park that's being built. It's being close to opening.
Well, actually, that became the talking point, that it was Whitewater. It was a Maxwell Gateway project.
Okay.
That was a part of the actual conversation for the ask.
I mean, it's an economic development.
Exactly.
Right.
And with a focus on infrastructure. And it will have that impact. What ended up happening, of course, as you know, and no doubt your viewers as well, there was an article written that put Montgomery pretty much as a whipping child out there, as if somehow the other, this is for some water park, typical kind of water park that people would experience and this kind of thing. And so it just, it sent, everybody in the direction of being critical about this. But no one had real context. And as I shared today on the Senate floor, historically speaking, we have always found ourselves in this state in particular where resources that were a lot more plentiful in the education budget, there may have been this supplement that could be used for certain economic development projects that would work to relate to education. So we're talking whether it's workforce, whether you're talking, obviously your traditional aspects of education, or in the case of the Whitewater facility, which also has an education component to it. I talked about today on the floor, where you have a zip line that goes into the ecosystem across the river, or the channels that have been, the rafting channels that have been talked about, endlessly as use for physics and in terms of Maxwell Air Force Base use and first responders use too. So it wasn't a simple project. It was really, it is, quite a meaningful project relating to not only a cross-section of the quote-unquote entertainment factors, but also educational factors in there. So it just it went in a different direction.
Well, you're right. Yeah, look, when you say water park, something comes to mind, and so I totally get what you're saying. Plus, you're right. People may not realize that when the state does economic development incentives, tax credits, all that, most of it comes from the Education Trust Fund. So I mean, that was not new. We are in the business of doing that. So I take your argument. So let me ask you this: what are the prospects of getting it back in? I mean, it was obviously in the governor's original budget. Do you think we could see an executive amendment from her to give something toward that project, or just something for Montgomery?
Well, I wouldn't presume what the governor might do as it relates to this. I do know the proof of the governor's support for what we asked, and I might add, Montgomery has really never made an ask for anything. I soon discovered that. But in the course, over the course of that conversation, the governor's budget it was in there. So when the question, that was no misleading us from the governor's office in terms of it being there. But between the governor's budget and what materialized from the education budget committees, it got cut, with nothing there. So, but I do think that Senator Barfoot and I are in lockstep in doing everything we can to recover those resources in whatever way possible, because the taxpayers from Montgomery are still on the line. They've already put their money into just that infrastructure project and around it. And so it would be like I'm saying to you 3 months ago, here's something I'm pretty sure we can work with you and the community to make happen. And I go and maybe get some money, because I know Todd's going to be good for this. There's $25 million, and now here we are, where you got taxpayers who've already invested. And I would, I'm going to work as hard as I can, and I know Senator Barfoot as well, to be sure that that something happens.
Okay.
So,
I'll
yeah.
be following it because I was seeing some social media posts. I mean, it's getting ready to open, I think. Or pretty close.
Yeah, I think the target date was July 7th, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
So there were already some videos of like kayakers and everything. It looked pretty cool.
And there was one of the major military, I forget his name right now, I wish I could remember, who was here, I believe, maybe a day or so ago, and was very interested because obviously most people know it's adjacent to Maxwell Air Force Base, which is one of our country's major military installations. And since the day this was talked about, there's been full buy-in from them, knowing that this is a significant project. And I might add, not only the impact for Montgomery and the central area, but for the state, and to know that we have our friends at Maxwell Air Force Base who are in full support and have never wavered in their support for something that they know is not only good for the city and the community, but also for our folks who are serving. So we have to do something about that.
Switching gears, I wanted to ask you about the issue of mental health. We've talked before about this is one of your key issues in improving services. We've obviously had a long way to come from where those cuts were. But the bill up this year is this 988. 988 already exists as a hotline, just like 911 for mental health crisis. But they're asking for funding. They want to expand services statewide, including rural areas, and so it would be a fee. It'd be a user fee on your bill. I was in committee and saw that. What do you think the prospects of this becoming a reality this session are?
It's hard to say when you get to the end of a session like this. And what I will say to you, and no doubt your experience tells you as well, whenever you have some spending, you want to do that at the beginning of a session. So it's really hard to say if we'll have some success with it now. But I hope we will. Because it's so important, I think, to so many people. And we have so many people right now who are struggling, particularly in the aftermath of COVID. And we need to help them.
I think COVID kind of
Excuse me.
opened a lot of eyes to mental health.
Yes.
Situation. Maybe it was one of those kind of taboo things. They didn't want to talk about it, that kind of thing. I think a lot of people are more open to it and recognize that it's okay and you need to talk about these kind of things. And you've just seen in this legislature a complete sea change towards investing in mental health. So I'm curious if this bill could possibly. I mean, look, anytime you raise a fee, that's not exactly the most popular thing to do, but the money's got to come from somewhere. Services cost money.
Absolutely, and look, like you just said, what's encouraging to me around this, and you've got last year or year before last, now Speaker Ledbetter led the efforts in mental health legislation there. We're no longer simply, as you pointed out a moment ago, mental health and any talk of it being taboo. But now, not only are we talking about, mental health and the challenges, but also the willingness to fund it. And so, I'm hopeful that this 988 bill is literally something that could be, life and death, literally. And as you know, in the committee hearing, one of our legislators gave an impassioned testimony that almost brought everyone to tears in that room.
Yeah.
And I do think, and I'm looking at a lot of adolescents who are suffering terribly. So we knew there would be the onslaught of tremendous mental health challenges in the aftermath of COVID. I don't think anyone really expected it would be as significant as it is right now. So it's good to see that our state is actually stepping up.
Well, we'll be following that bill and all the others that are going to be
up of the
last
Stay tuned.
Last couple of days. But Senator, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Look forward to it.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
Birmingham's Rickwood Field is the nation's oldest operating ballpark and served as the home field of the Birmingham Barons, Birmingham A's, and the Birmingham Black Barons for decades. The Birmingham Barons inaugurated the new field on August 18, 1910, by defeating the Montgomery Climbers. The Black Barons played there between 1924 and 1950. Rickwood hosted Birmingham's minor league teams for several seasons through 1987. From 1967 to 1975, the Barons were owned by Ensley native Charlie O. Finley and were part of the Kansas City and later Oakland A's organization. More than 100 members of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame have played at the field, including Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Satchel Paige, and Willie Mays. Today, the historic field is managed by Friends of Rickwood and hosts local amateur and college teams. The Birmingham Barons still play a ceremonial throwback game at the ballpark every year, the Rickwood Classic, which celebrates Barons teams of the past and this historic field.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7:30 for our Weekend Review program. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.